Hi and welcome to A Mum's Truth. My name's Nadine Whitlinger and I'm your host. Today, in this episode, it will be just me. I would like to keep things real and share my experiences without, making them sound any more nice. And yeah, so today I want to talk about what it means showing up for yourself and how important consistency is and all of those things. So, what's happening? About 3.5, 4 years ago, we decided to change our lifestyle, and my husband decided to work away, meaning that, it just offered the opportunity for me to stay home and fully immerse in my role as a mum. And I'm really grateful for that because I really enjoy being home and, doing all the homeschooling. And yeah, really just, I really always enjoyed getting into this nurturing role. And about 5, 6 weeks ago, my husband, yeah, he, without any pre-warning, was just stood down at work. And it meant that he was home for 5 weeks, which was nice having him back for a longer time. And it was great for the boys to have so much time with their dad. And it also meant that there was a lot of help for me, around homeschooling and doing all the things that I do all the time. So I feel like I was a little bit spoiled. And that also was about the time that I started this podcast. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to no longer procrastinate and get started and get into it. But it also means I always knew that this, time will come to an end. And he has left us again at the end of last week and will be gone for a couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm having a bit of a hard time adjusting to doing all the things alone, plus, staying consistent with my new commitments. But I think, yeah, I just want to get right into my commitments and why they're so important to me, what my motivators are. And I think when I fully immersed into the mother's role and into this nurturing role, I started simultaneously putting a lot of pressure on me. And I think I mentioned it in a podcast before that there's often this expectations on women to have children, to have a career, to do all the things. And for a very long time, I struggled, to say openly that I'm a full-time mom. I always said I'm just a full-time mom. And I feel like I also put a lot of pressure on myself just, because I had all this free time on hand, which is not really free time. And I think a lot of mums can relate to that when I say that. So I started putting a lot of pressure on myself and, this is my job basically. I have to do it right and I have to do it as best as I can. And often this pressure just became a little bit of a burden, I reckon. And I think it's also affected, not always in a positive way, the way I did things around the house, the way I did things with my boys. And, so I feel like yeah, there's definitely been a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of it stems really from the guilt, right? Once you've reached a certain level of consciousness and you want to become a good parent and you want to do things better than they were then in your childhood, you put already a lot of pressure onto yourself. And there's so much guilt that you carry and sometimes, unconsciously pass on to your family members. And in that case, obviously the children. So I feel like I'm I'm realizing this since a few years, but I'm still trying to work with it. And I kept preaching people over and over about the importance of self-care and how we have to make room for ourselves. But, and I think a lot of people can relate to this also, it's always easy to give an advice, but it is hard to actually do it for yourself in many ways. And then also, what is self-care even? Like I feel like a lot of us have a very different perception of what self-care is, which is fine. It does not have to be the same thing for everyone. But what I've noticed over the last years while being a full-time mom was that guilt was driving me a lot to put myself on the back burner, basically. I almost started to self-sacrificing for the good of everyone around me and forgetting about my own needs and wants. And what do you do when you get to this point? And I think a lot of moms feel this way. They feel like they're giving and giving, but they sometimes struggle to make room for themselves. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to set a boundary within the family and then not feeling your own guilt again that you actually take this time. So, yeah, that's the one thing. What I figured out over quite a while was basically that, and I think that's something that started back in 2020 with all the things that were going on in the world. Or I would say I've rediscovered it because I was told as a child I was always really loud and singing and telling stories. So I was always out there using my voice. And that voice has just gotten more silence over the years. And back in 2020, I feel like I rediscovered my voice. I had to use my voice very often during, those crazy years when we had to stand up for what we felt was right and had to make choices and had to verbalize them. And, it did not just stop with that. You also had to explain to your children what was going on, why was everything changing all of a sudden. So I had to really step into this using my voice and becoming more clear of how I want to use my voice, because you don't want to go out and yell at people. That's not what I mean. You want to use your voice in a good way. And I really rediscovered my voice, and I now believe that my voice is one of my biggest assets. It's something that makes me unique, being able to express myself. It's also a form of it's an expression of my creativity as well. And yeah, so I rediscovered that my voice was basically a really important tool. And when did this start? It probably started back in 2023 when I was trying really hard to build my counseling and coaching business. I was so focused on sharing things, but I felt like it was not the right time. And I also didn't choose the right way of doing it. So over time, I just realized that. And then, sorry, just going back to 2023 or 20, I think that was then a year later, back in 2024, I decided to just, drop the whole business idea and literally just focus on being a mom, on being with my kids and learning to loving it without feeling guilty that I was not going to provide in a financial manner. And what happened over time was that I still felt this urge of sharing things. I feel like there's so many things I want to share with the world. And I was always leaning a little bit towards having my own podcast. And man, procrastination. I'm sure a lot of you can also relate to this word and what it sometimes does to us. It was not until last year, September, October, that I felt like, okay, I have to make an actual change, because I feel like the push and all the signposts that it was really necessary for me to find a way of expressing myself and to create a little bit more space for myself. I just could not ignore it anymore. And so I decided, hey, let's do it. So I started designing things. I started working on names, which are not not the same as like my ideas changed over the last 6, 7 months, right? But so that was basically like I was getting all into it, and then I faced technology and I faced all of the things that I had to learn, and I just complicated it by trying to pursue something that was perfect so I can present it to the world. But, what even is perfect? What might be perfect to me might not be good enough for you from a perfectionism sense. But also, I feel like we hear this a lot, that people are way too focused on producing something that's really perfect, to showing it to the world, but then get lost in the process and never follow through. And that was literally me. I got hung up with all the technology stuff, and then I was like, you know what, screw this. I think life, and as a mom in particular, we go through these up and downs. Our kids go through their phases, and sometimes we have seasons where things are more busy for us, and then we've got seasons where it gets a bit more quiet, and we would have more time, but we might also need this time to recharge. So we're ready and prepared for when it gets busy again. So I feel like there were so many ways for me to, on the one hand, making excuses. On the other hand, I'm trying to show compassion to my past self, and I'm also trying to show compassion to everyone out there that's in the same situation. And just because I'm sitting here does not mean that I'm not still feeling this way, and that I'm not still dealing with some of the feelings of like, I really don't feel it today. I feel like, maybe there's something else I want to do. And what I did realize over time, though, was that I was procrastinating a lot, and I feel like I wasted a lot of my time. I wasted a lot of my time focusing on other things that, were really not my business. I also focused on a lot of, how do I, well, it's not really just a focus, but I feel like I just wasted a lot of time. I felt physically exhausted and did not really feel like I knew where I could recharge, unless I was literally just laying on the couch at nighttime and was watching some, I don't know, senseless show on Netflix, just, to unwind before I went to bed. And over the time, from when I first had the idea back in September last year until about 6 weeks ago, I feel like that it almost got painful. This urge of doing something, knowing that I had to do something. I knew I have to shift things, because if I don't shift them, I'm just going to turn into this miserable person, right? And I'm not sure about you guys, but my children are my biggest motivators for anything I do in life. I really believe that we can preach our kids whatever we want. If we show them the opposite, it's a waste of time. And I always imagine my kids in the future looking back and looking at their mom, and I want them to feel some sense of pride, and that I went after what I really wanted and what I really needed. And I'm not saying that this does not come with a process. So I think a lot of the feelings and the stuff I went through is just part of the process. It's this, how miserable can you get until you actually change something? And I mean, look out in the world. How many people are complaining about their jobs, are complaining about where they are? There's so many people, they complain and complain and complain, but they don't actually take charge of what's happening in their life. And I feel like I always had that naturally a bit, that, life is what you make it. And I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect at all. And I've gone through many processes and many phases, and I changed my mind a lot of times, but that's okay. It's all part of it. What changed though was that about 2 or 3 months ago, I felt like it was hitting me. It was like I was hitting a wall. And I knew it. I knew I had to make a change and do something to get towards my greater goal, or I'm kind of letting myself down. And I learned a lot about my self-esteem and what it means to live in integrity. And, I always felt like I resonated with, for example, if a person says something, but then the actions don't match what they say. I'm like, how can they look in the mirror and look at themselves and feeling good about themselves? Well, I don't think they can. And I feel like at some point, you have to realize that you're letting yourself down. And I feel like I knew all of those things, but I was still procrastinating because it was the easier option. Well, it felt the easier option instead of just taking the step. So I joined a 6-month program back in March, I believe. And for the first 2 months, I felt like I was so consumed by the achievements of others in the container, where I felt like, wow, maybe I'm just in the wrong place. But I stuck around, I worked through the process, and I remember one call and I was basically called out on it. Like, you have too many excuses, Nadine. You're not. And I think I really needed that. And I was open for it. I was open to be criticized to achieve this change. And well, fast forward to June 2026. This episode, I'm recording my 6th episode of A Mom's Truth. And what I realized is that since I started it, it has given me this confidence boost. It has given me this boost in my self-esteem. I feel extremely good about myself. And I also feel like that there was a change how I approach setting a boundary, right? Because I feel like as a mom, you get sometimes lost in that, the one you want to do something and then someone needs something and you're helping there. And by the time you've done all the things, then someone else needs something else. And, it's so easy to get caught up in that spiral. And I feel like I was preaching so much in the past about boundaries within the family, but always struggle to uphold them because of the guilt in the back of my mind, basically. But now, after 6 weeks, I feel like I can honestly say I've had this incredible change in how I look at it, because I feel like it's affected not just me, it affects how I show up for my family, and it affects how I show up into the world, because I feel like I'm doing something that fills my cup. And so by sharing this, I think I want to just also trigger somewhat of a thought process. What is it that fills up your cup? I feel like for a very long time, I thought self-care is going to the spa for a day on your own, having a massage, having a hot cup of tea, and, just recharge your batteries. It's not that for me. And I think everyone needs to figure that out for themselves. And what's really helped me to become more clear about my needs to actually take care of myself was spending time in nature. And that sounds so cliche, but it really has, because I can unwind and it's literally just me fully in the present. And I can actually look at it from a really clear point of view without being emotionally charged because I'm annoyed because something doesn't work the way I thought it would, and all the other things that can happen throughout the day. And so when I first recorded an episode, we had like, we've in this 6-month program, we've got like a weekly call, and we're like all celebrating my win that I finally went out there. It's not perfect, right? It's not perfect. There might be people out there, they watch this podcast and they're like, oh my goodness, it's not edited. It's, maybe the camera quality is not great. There's no music, nothing at this point, but it was it was about getting started. It was about getting out there, getting more experience, getting more confident in what you're doing, and figuring everything else out along the way. And that's literally where I find myself. So anyway, on this call after my first episode was released, we're like having this little celebration. Everyone's happy for me, and I feel extremely proud, and I feel like I was on this high and in this bubble. But I also know out of experience that I have a little bit of a tendency, and I think a lot of us have that tendency, that we start something, but if we don't stay consistent, it kind of dies off. And so I was asked the question, what's your plan? How often do you want to record a podcast? And I could not answer this question. But what I knew deep in my core was that I have to have somewhat of a regularity just to make sure I stay on track and I keep showing up for myself. And, I mean, I studied counseling and all of those things. So I know how long it takes to make something an actual habit. And what I just mentioned, my self-esteem, right? Like, I think I would feel really shitty about myself if I wouldn't rock up. And so at the moment, I find myself in this place. And I think that's really to just keep it real. I'm not sitting here and it's all rosy and rainbows, because I'm finding myself in this place. I really want to record once a week. Now I'm also readjusting into being alone, doing the homeschooling, doing all the things. We've got heaps going on during the day, and still showing up for myself. And I know that I cannot let this go, because I feel like it's a bit like being on a drug, honestly. I feel like I've been on this high and in this bubble, and I do not want to lose this. I look in the mirror in the morning and I feel I'm accomplishing something. I'm working towards a long-term goal. And let me tell you that I've got a big vision and I'm working towards that. But what's almost even better, and I like, I've been talking about it now the last 20 minutes, that I think it's really important that you do something for yourself. And the main thing here is in my message that I'm doing this for myself. And I think it's important that you find something that you do for yourself, because it just makes you feel better about yourself. And yeah, now I'm drifting off in my thoughts. But what I feel like is almost equally rewarding is the way my children look at me. And let me tell you that I've recorded the first episode and I didn't make a big deal about it at home. And then I showed it to my son, to one of my boys, and I said, hey, check this out. I'm on Spotify. And and then, we got into it, and then my little one comes and joins, and he's like, oh my God, Mom, you've got a YouTube channel, so like, and then I get like slowly this feedback. They're like telling me they're really proud of me and that they think it's really cool what I'm doing. And surely a week later, my daughter calls me and she's like, oh my God, Mom, I'm halfway through episode number 2 and I'm loving it and I'm so proud of you. And I'm not doing this because I'm looking for external acknowledgement. But coming back to what I said earlier, I think it is really important that our actions meet our words. And I don't want to preach my kids. You always have to work for what you really want. You have to go after it. But I'm not doing it. So knowing that I am showing them that I really want to get somewhere and that I'm working towards my goals. And I've been saying for such a long time, I would be really keen to have my own podcast. But now actually having my own podcast, I think that has left something within them that's just incredible. Like, it makes me almost emotional, because I feel like it makes me That's what makes me really proud of myself, because I'm setting an example for my children. And what else is there for a mother if we cannot show them the way? If we can't show them how we show up for ourselves, how are our kids supposed to go out in the world if they don't know how to show up for themselves? How can we show them that it is not a good thing waiting for external validation, but rather going for what you do for your own needs so you feel good about yourself? We can tell them so much. There's so many books, so much advice, but if we don't actually live it, I don't think they will actually take this on. So I think that's like one of my main takeaways. But now, yeah, coming back to this, like, how do you keep yourself consistent? And I think there has to be somewhat of a like, it's a fine line, right? So last week, for example, and the week before, I released the episode. Oh no, I think the last week only, but the week before I didn't. Anyway, so I'm like trying to release the episode on a Tuesday because that's how I keep myself accountable. It's got to be a Tuesday. But then I had some recordings with guests on a Monday, but now it's, Tuesday 11:30 as I'm recording this, and I haven't uploaded it, while last week it was already published at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. So I feel like I'm trying to balance this at the moment, because part of me is like, wow, are you losing track? What's going on? Like, they're trying to make sure I stay on track. But at the same time, man, I'm a mom and I'm running the show solo for 2 weeks at a time while I'm trying to establish a podcast, showing up for myself, still being the nurturer, and I mean, I said in the first episode what this is all about. I believe in a healthy lifestyle. I believe in healthy food. So I'm not just going to go to the drive-through tonight and get Macca's. We're going to actually cook proper food and all of those things. So it's time consuming. I really value a clean space. I obviously have to do all the education stuff with my boys. So there's so much going on through the day, but I have to stay consistent. And that's like this voice I have in the back of my mind. You have to stay consistent. I think it's a good voice, but there is a bit of a lean way. So what is my biggest motivator? My biggest motivator are my children. I want to show up because I want to set an example for my kids. I think there's nothing worse than parents telling their kids, you know, if you go to school and you study really hard, then you can go to university and you can get this great role. And, that's how success is defined for them. For me, it's not. For me, it's genuinely not that. For me, it is my role as a mom, what I give to my kids. And I want to show up in integrity. I want to show up and not just talk and not follow my own dreams. And I think that's where many parents might get it wrong, or not knowingly getting it wrong. I'm not trying to offend anyone, and I'm also not trying to, sit here and tell everyone I'm the perfect mom, because I am not. I am just like many other people and other moms, still figuring things out along the way. And also, a lot of my beliefs have changed very recently. So it's not like I've always parented like this way. I always knew I have to show up for myself. There was a part in my life when I was very self-destructive. And I feel like I've shown them the exact opposite of what I actually want them to learn. So it all only starts making sense and falling into place. So I think this is something really, really, really important, and something we cannot forget when we show up for ourselves, and why we do all of those things, and why, you know, why we do what we do. And I think another really big one I want to mention here is like this confidence boost, right? Mm. And that's something I feel like I'm experiencing a lot the last 6 years in particular. And I'm very focused on this last 6 years period rather than everything that happened before, which is obviously also very crucial. Everything that happened in my childhood and from my childhood until 2020 is very important and is part of why I am who I am today. But I feel like I'm just looking at the world and I look at myself and my children, the way I parent. I look at everything differently. Health, everything is not what it was before 2020. And so as I started getting a little bit into the coaching era, maybe, and I even had a time when I drifted off a little bit into the new age section, which yeah, I'm not just a really big fan of it anyway, but so I feel like there was a lot about affirmations and what do you tell yourself and all of those things. And I'm like, I do not, I honestly do not want to talk any of the things down that I learned through that time. For example, how important it is how I talk to myself and how I talk about myself. I think it's extremely important that we practice gratitude by journaling and doing all the things. And, that we appreciate what we've got, where we're at. And man, there's so much that we can appreciate. But I was asked a few times, I'm like, because I'm like, I told people it ties into your confidence. And then people, I feel like women in particular, I might be wrong, but that's maybe also because I work mostly with women, is that there is this misconception of being confident and it's just related to the outside of your body, right? And again, I'm not the perfect woman. I'm not sitting here and tell you, oof, I've got it all, because I don't. I have days when I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, it's actually not always easy to see your body age, I find. And I've chosen to age gracefully and avoiding any of the things that you can inject into your bodies to look younger for longer. I don't know if that even works, stop dyeing my hair, all of those things. So I feel like it's also part of the aging process. I feel like we have to go through this. But even as a younger woman, I feel like when I look back at photos, I'm sometimes really surprised when I think back about that time and how I felt about myself and my appearance. Then it makes me almost a little bit sad. But I've come to the point of realization that there was nothing I could have changed on my actual body that would have made me feel better and more confident. And I feel like that's another one of those really big cliche things where people are like, what do you mean? Like, but it really is like that. I feel like the more I've been using my voice, the more I show up with integrity and the more I show up and, you know, be the example I want to be, show up authentically, just how I am, and not pretend to be someone else. And I can tell you, I did that for a very long time. I lived other people's ideals, but not mine. But the more I get to this point of like, just breaking free of that spell, basically, and just coming back to myself, speaking my truth, showing up the way I am, follow through with my ideas so that, my actions and words match. I feel like I've come to this point where I feel a lot better about myself. And I'm not sitting here again and say that I've got it all, but it's a process. And it just made me realize that what's going on in here and how I feel about myself equally shows in the way how I show up just as my physical appearance. And I think we all can agree we've got days where we're not feeling it. And I can guarantee you there will be days if you would run past me in the shops, you're like, oof, she homeless or what's going on. But that's, I think that's also okay. We don't have to like feel great every day. I mean, that's part of being human, right? Sometimes we just don't feel like we just don't feel great or something's bothering us. And I mean, there's so much that's going on. But coming back to the way you show up to the world, I feel like that's giving you this confidence boost in a way you just can't get with any extra makeup. You can't get with any Botox. You can't get with any hair dye or, hiding whatever, wrinkles, cellulite, whatever it is. And I often wondered what it is when like we live close to the ocean, right? So we spend a significant time at the beach, and then you look around and you see these perfect women with these perfect bodies. And then all of a sudden you have this woman walk past that's maybe a bit of a bigger woman, very curvy and really good looking. And there's an aura about this person, but it is just the way they show up. It's the way they show up for themselves, and it's the way they speak about themselves and they feel about themselves. And I think that's also something really important we have to realize as mums, right? And I hear that a lot when people when I share this, and then mums say, "Oh yeah, especially because I've got girls." I don't think it's just girls. I think it's important that our kids get that on their way as well. Like there's this perception of setting an ideal of how a woman has to look like, how a woman has to age now, which is so unnatural. And I feel like it's always been a bit of a thing. How do you navigate that as a mom? Because I don't want my daughter to go out. I don't want my sons to go out like that either. But I feel like for the boys, I see it more from a different point of view. But like coming back to my daughter, I don't want her to go out and feel like she's not good enough because she might not fit in a size 4. You know what I mean? Which is total rubbish. And I think it's also important what what example we set for our boys. I mean, how do they look at the people around them? How and by what do they judge people? Do they judge them only by their physical appearance? Or is it important to them how they show up for themselves, how they speak about themselves, how they speak about other people, how they express themselves? So I think that's just what I come to realize more and more is that all of this ties in together. We have to show up for ourselves, to show up better in the world, to set an example for our kids and for the people around us. But most importantly, how it makes us feel better about ourselves and how it shifts the perception of yourself. So I think that's something really, really important to consider when you show up for yourself as well. And yeah, coming back to my podcast and how I have to keep myself on track to show up for it every week, right? And for you, it might not be your podcast. It might be going to the gym. It might be doing something else that you're working on. It might be something else that you want to implement in your life, any habit, how do you, like, I'm actually curious to also get some feedback. What do you do to hold yourself accountable? And what do you do to stay on track with your goals? How do you make something become a habit? Pretty sure that's a saying, if you do something for a certain amount of time, it becomes a habit. I don't know if it's so easy and if you can make it so broad for everything that you do, but I'm just really curious to get some feedback, right? And speaking of feedback, I I just wanted to also use this moment to say thank you to everyone that has messaged me or left me a comment so far, because I feel like you have no idea what it meant to me. And as I said, I'm going through the motions just like everyone else. I had moments when I was like, oh, I'm not feeling it today and I feel not inspired. And um, I also don't feel like talking every day, right? I'm not every day in the mood to do all the things that I want to do. Sometimes I just want to be left alone and be in my little cave. But I feel like your comments and your messages came at exactly the right time. And it shows me that I'm on the right track. And so I think it's important if you see someone working towards a goal, if you think someone's really great at what they're doing, sometimes it's nice to share that with them. It's really, I can certainly say that I really appreciated some of the messages. Some of them touched me to tears, right? Because it gave me some feeling about myself I haven't felt in a very long time. And that's not to say that I was not, happy being a mum. And I'm saying only, but I think you know what I mean here, that I was a mum only. But it was just because I'm showing up in a different way and it makes me an even better mom. It does not, I don't have to go out there and record an hour-long podcast and, feel like I'm missing out on things that I could have done for everyone around me. And sometimes all it is just a little bit of, reshuffling of things that you do at home to actually make some room for things. And if you've listened to the episode where I spoke with Kat about human design, that was just also a really big one for me. And I think if you haven't heard about it, whether you think it's true or not, that's up to you. And I can't really say anything about it. But what I think is you should be open-minded and you should just listen to it and find out a little bit more because it helped me to understand how I work better. And for example, I used to be this person that I was so structured. Everything was like, I was such a person of routine. Everything was exactly like that. But then if anything went wrong along the line, it just threw everything off. And I was in a shitty mood and it was a crappy day. And what I've learned is that I need some sort of structure because, man, being a mom and doing all the things for yourself and someone else, it just requires some sort of organization. At the same time, I am not someone that can live if everything's planned out. It takes away the fun for me, and I'm staying consciously away from that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's the way for everyone. That's just what I found out, how my blueprint works and how I work. And it just works for me. Although I have to shift some stuff to make room so I can actually sit here and record this and then do all the uploading. And, I'm now also getting more into the nitty-gritty of all the technology that kept me from even proceeding back in September, October. So I think that's also something important when we think about the process, right? That's just what helped me to see it. And I think a lot of people will tell you exactly the same when they went through something. And at the time it was frustrating and it didn't make sense. But now they look back and they're like, oh, it makes so much sense. It was all necessary to get to where you are right now. And yes, so I had to do some shifting and, you know, I'm still doing all the things. I washed washing today. I tidied up the house, I vacuumed, I walked the dog. Now I'm sitting here and making time for myself. We did all the academics for my son today, which is not much, but what we do, so there's a lot, of things that I have to do just to get the space for one day in a week. I can be a bit more, chill tomorrow morning again. So what's my message here, right? I said a bit ago, I really think it's important for me to trigger some sort of a thought process for you. What is it that you're really into that can actually help you to refill your own cup? What is it that you can do to make time? And God knows, I know that there's often days when you feel like, wow, I literally can't fit anything in here. And there's always someone that tells you otherwise, but no one's in your shoes and no one feels like you do. So I'm not sitting here and telling you that because I got and still get very frustrated at people telling me, oh, you can do anything, but that's just not how it works. If you do something that's really valuable to you, which for me is my family and nurturing them. So I feel like I have to work around that rather than doing other things and fit my family in somewhere. Anyhow, so I'm just saying that, where is it that you could maybe a little bit do a little bit of some shifting where you can fit in some time to sit down and do something that really fills your cup. What is it anyway? And what little steps can you take to get to a bigger step? And then also just notice how it makes you feel, how it makes you feel about yourself, and pay attention to how it makes the close ones around you feel when you show up in a way you haven't before. And the respect that you feel for yourself and the pride and the confidence, it's just unbeatable. So yeah, I think, just going over my notes, I think that was my main message today. If you have any questions, if you have any comments for me, any feedback, I will pop in my email, or I actually think I pop in my Instagram profile. I've got a little Instagram profile for A Mum's Truth. If you're keen, follow along, share the podcast. I would really appreciate that. Leave me any comments, and let's have an open discussion. I would love that. And what else did I want to say? I forgot about it. Lost my train of thought. Happens to the best of the best. Anyway, I'm really grateful if you've stuck along for this episode. And anyway, I'm doing my best to stay consistent. And all of the things, when I just try to feel in how I feel right now, I feel extremely proud because I had a few moments where I was really concerned because husband's gone and I have to get into this routine, doing things alone. Will I be able to make it work? Man, I did make it work. And anyway, that's it from me today. I'm appreciating you guys. Take good care. Bye.